Welcome into the Invest Well Show. I'm your host, Michael Wall. I want to talk to you today about a topic that is kind of being thought about in the halls of Congress and the Senate, and quite honestly, in the administration. It is the financial transaction tax. You're like, wait a minute, another tax? Yeah, there's going to be another tax that they're proposing to bring out, and this one is massive. In fact, it's going to affect you whether you got thousands of dollars invested or billions of dollars invested. This is one that would come across the pike to literally affect every single investor in America, and it is a powerful thing. You're not going to want to miss that on the show today. We're going to unpack it, talk about that, and really dive in. Listen, before we jump into that, I always like to take a minute and say thank you to the sponsors of the show, which really are kind of making all this produce and happen. Many of you may know, you may not know if you're newer to the show, that I actually have several companies and have had for several years where our teams there have been helping families protect, grow, and reduce taxes on their wealth. Three companies there, really: Wall Lehman, Wall Private Wealth, U.S. Private Wealth, all designed to help families with their wealth, business coaching, consulting, and financial planning along the way. You got questions about that? You got questions about your investments? Head over to leanonthewall.com and learn more there. All right, so let's jump into this financial transaction tax, because this is something that is just something we're going to have to deal with in some way. And there are ways. Here's the good news. There are some ways that you're going to be able to protect yourself from this in some capacities. And I'm going to talk about this a little bit later in the show. So what's happening here? Well, the President Biden, obviously we know Biden is in office now. It's crazy to think about President Biden, right? Because of all the things that we've seen over the years. They're basically proposing a new tax that would enable, and I got my notes here so I don't miss anything because this is really important. It would enable a tax, a small tax, real small, kind of insignificant. You wouldn't even necessarily see it. It would propose a new tax on every time stocks are bought and sold. Now, what's interesting is when you take a look at stocks being bought and sold and what happens as they're bought and sold, whether it's through the NYSE, which is the New York Stock Exchange, or the NASDAQ, or things like that, we know that there's a lot of transactions that happen each and every day. Well, here's what's interesting. When you take a look at what is projected to come in revenue-wise if this tax is actually implemented, they're projecting that it would actually increase revenue by $777 billion over the course of a decade. Now, if you're not a time genius, you'll know that a decade is 10 years, right? So we're talking about $777 billion over a decade. Now, I want you to just think about this for a minute and to really kind of put this in context. Let's think about what's happening right now with some of the stimulus that's getting ready to be proposed and potentially passed, at least at the time I'm shooting this, which is the end of February. That is about 1.9 trillion, with a T, trillion dollars of stimulus that is being proposed, being passed. We're talking, we've seen stimulus bills with hundreds of billions and even trillions before, conversations and all of these things that are coming out. And now we're saying, okay, so we're passing this stimulus bill with almost $2 trillion of money. And now it should cause us all to say, wait a minute, where is that money going, right? When we realize that a lot of the money is not going to America, it's actually going to other countries and other things, and small amounts will actually end up in your pocket. The investor, the American citizen, small amount of that stimulus will end up in your pocket. And now they're proposing an additional tax of every single time a stock is traded. You may say, well, how will that affect markets, Mike? How will that affect the economy? How will that affect trading? How will that affect your 401k, your retirement account, your investment account? Well, I got to tell you, it's going to affect it in a big way. Think of it like this. So, first off, everything that we do is taxed. You think about that? I mean, it's more than just ordinary income. It's more than just your capital gains tax when you sell property or large purchases of stock that actually is non-qualified or non-IRA money. There's cap gains tax on that stuff. But you buy a cell phone, right? You have your cell phone. Everybody have us. Hey, you got a cell phone bill? I have a neat little cover. Actually, this is done by my daughter, JL. She did this when she was 9. Super cool. Everybody's got a cell phone. When you pay your bill every month, there's a tax. When you go get gas at the gas station, there's a tax. When you buy pretty much everything that we purchase, there's some type of a tax, right? Along with our ordinary income tax as well. So now they're proposing this additional tax. Well, what happens is almost like when you're driving on the freeway, like the first time the state that you're in, if they opened up a turnpike, right, and they had other highways, but they opened up a turnpike, there were some people that said, you know what, I'm not going to pay a tax. I'm not going to basically pay a toll to drive on that road. I'll just keep doing what I was doing. Well, then time moves along and more people drive on the road and they get used to what's happening, kind of herd mentality, kind of like the frog in the pot, right? Start out with the water that's cold and then let it get a little warmer, a little warmer, a little warmer, and the frog just kind of ends up getting cooked in the pot because it gets used to the reality of that warmth. I think initially what's going to happen if this is proposed, and this is shared, and there's a clip that I'm going to play in a minute as well, from a Congressman, Patrick McHenry, that talks about this. But before we play that, I think what's going to initially happen, it is going to, I really believe, massively affect the stock market. Why? Well, because if traders know that every single time that they buy or sell transactions in stocks, make a transaction with a stock, it's going to affect the amount of trading that actually occurs. Well, if you have investments that are in the market, right? If you have stocks or bonds or mutual funds or whatever it may be, they're affected by markets. It's going to affect what you have. So I want to play this clip for a minute from Patrick McHenry. He's a congressman, and he talks about why he believes that this would be a disaster for us as a country. Take a listen.
The financial transaction tax is intended to only hit the wealthiest, but when average everyday investors still buy stocks and bonds, they're going to be hit. There's one study that shows that people will have to work an additional 2 to 3 years in order to make up the difference for this financial transaction tax.
All right, so when you take a listen to that, it's pretty clear that he's obviously opposed to this tax and the idea of this tax coming to fruition. I don't know if this is going to happen or not. I don't know if this is going to come out. I don't know if they're going to do it. I think one of the things that we got to be thinking about as we the people in a lot of ways, this is something where you need to be dialing in. I want to challenge you, if you're not subscribed as you're watching this show, whether you're watching it via YouTube or whether you're watching it on social media, I want to challenge you to make sure that you're subscribed to the show. A good way to do it is to search Invest Well Show on YouTube or search Michael D. Wall. D as in David, Michael D. Wall, and make sure you subscribe to the show and get notifications. This is something that we are going to need to kind of band together on as consumers to make sure that if this is proposed, we are reaching out to our congressmen and our senators and saying, no, we do not want this to be approved, because it's going to be a massive thing and it could drastically affect your overall retirement structure. All right, so I talked earlier in the show about some ways that you can protect yourself, and I want to kind of dive into that right now. If you've listened to me in the past, I know if you're watching me, this is a little bit newer for you, a newer experience, but if you've listened to me in the past, you know that I've talked a lot about the idea of off-market or alternative type investment structures, okay? Whether that's private equity, whether that's direct real estate, whether that's utilizing other types of investments to help you along the way. These are really important things to be thinking about. Now, that doesn't mean that you don't buy investments in the market. What it does mean is when you buy investments in the market, you're mindful of the fact that you're not going to be in and out and in and out and in and out. So if you have that kind of philosophy where you're in today and out tomorrow, buying something, selling something, buying something, selling something, it may not behoove you to maximize your dollars if this tax passes. So some things that you can do to prepare in advance for this is actually create a plan, more of a well-rounded plan for your portfolio. One of the ways you can do that is by looking for investments that are off market in some of the things that I mentioned. Now, if you have questions about what that looks like, that's where you can reach out to some of the folks that I mentioned earlier, the sponsors of the show. Go to leanonthewall.com and talk to that team about what's available there for you to help you kind of diversify well. If you're in a place where you have, let's say, less than $1 million, well, now you're in a place where you're investing and you're buying into markets. You really want to be cognitive of what you're purchasing and why you're purchasing it, and having an idea of really how long you're probably planning on being in that stock or opportunity when you're there. This will help diminish, really in a lot of ways, the amount of taxes that could be paid if this financial transaction tax is actually imposed. So all of these things are really just the idea of paying attention to what's coming, paying attention to what could be, paying attention if it is passed, and then really paying attention to how your monies are being managed. This is so crucial. The other thing that we have that we're building, I'm really, really excited about, is we're going to give the opportunity and really invite you to join us in a private club. So if you have less than $1 million, there's a really unique opportunity, and all you need to do is head over to privatewealthclub.co, and there's going to be a lot of great information there that I believe is going to help you on this journey. But I wanted to bring this topic out to you because this is something that you may be hearing about here, maybe hearing about there. But I think if we all realize and think about it, really what's happening at the core of all of this is they're saying, hey, we need more money. The government, we need more money. Now, I think as we, the people, if the government said, listen, we've made some really bad decisions financially. You know, it's like if your kid comes to you and asks you for money, hey, Dad, can I borrow X amount of dollars? And they take that money, and obviously, hopefully you ask, what's it for? And they take the money and they spend it, and they're like, I blew that money, whatever. Well, the next time maybe they come back, you might be a little more cautious to say, well, wait a minute, son. You asked me for money before, you took that money, you blew it, and now you're asking me for more. It's not going to happen. We're not going to just keep giving you money to spend it on things that are a waste. And that's essentially what's happening with the government. They are asking for more, they're getting more, they're getting more, they're getting more. And so I think we, the people, need to be thinking about what are some ways that we can circumvent this problem to protect ourselves, to protect yourself as you invest money for your future. You got to be thinking outside the box. You got to be looking at off-market or alternative strategy. And you have to be mindful of, if you are investing in the market, what are you investing in and why? And this will help you have a higher probability and really a much higher chance of success long-term with the investments that you have. This is a big thing. We need to make sure that we're mindful of this. This financial transaction tax is something that potentially could come along the way. And I know a lot of us have been in a place for years where we're like, well, that's not going to happen, or this isn't going to happen. And now we're starting to see a lot of things happening that we never thought would have occurred, and they are occurring. This is something that we must, as I mentioned earlier, kind of bind together on as people and stand up with our congressmen and senators and say, no, we will not stand for this, because this could have a huge adverse effect on our overall investment portfolios, structures, and the economy as a whole when it comes to the investment scene. It's a powerful thing, important thing. So this is something that you need to take a minute and you need to share. If there's 2 or 3 or 4 folks that's been, kind of friends, whatever it may be, that you connect with, interact with, text with throughout the day, take a minute or two and share this with them and say, listen, this is something that you need to be mindful of and be aware of along the way. I know a lot of times people might be just sharing things politically or other things in general. This is an important topic that people need to be mindful of. And as we all come together as a community through the Invest Well Show, we're going to be sharing topical information that's going to help you really make good decisions and better decisions in relation to your investments. So I'm excited for this on the journey. Again, make sure you subscribe to the show. Leave your comments below as well, what you enjoyed about the show. If there's things that you would like to hear more of, I would like to hear that as well. If you got questions about different things, leave that in comments below as well. And as always, my goal and really desire for this show is to help empower you so you can live on purpose and live with purpose. Hope you have a great one, and we'll talk to you next show. Thank you for listening to the Invest Well Show. Please note that this information shared on the show is not investment advisory advice, and it may not be reflective of your personal situation or the needs that you have. If you have questions specific to your financial situation, please make sure that you reach out to an investment advisor directly or a tax attorney or tax coach or CPA to help you with your personal situation. Any additional questions that you may have, please make sure that you seek out a professional to get the guidance needed for your specific situation. Again, all content and information shared on this show is not to be deemed as specific investment advisory advice.